Alrighty, so let's get into the next one. We're doing uh, all the races of the world this week. We're talking about all of them. We've talked about several already, and we're going through these big four impactful lessons that every human should learn and how they play into all of the different races of the world. So we've already done um, community with Africans. We've already done um, logic with the Chinese. We've already done faith with India. And so now all that's left is individuality. And for individuality, I don't think it's anyone's surprise that we're going to be talking about Europeans here. I mean, that's where individuality has been most manifest, and it's obvious. Everyone knows it. Um, and so then the question is why? Because as we said at the towards the beginning of this week, um, essentially all people everywhere, that baseline state is kind of like this aboriginal small family tribe kind of thing. And so how did Europe go from that to this hyper individualistic uh state? And it's similar to Africa. If you recall, yesterday we talked about how Africa was, in that same, baseline state of, we've got our tribe, we're doing our thing, right? But then they had conflicts with people, and that changed who they were necessarily, because when you have conflicts with other people, well, you got to get tougher to make sure that you win. But with Europe, it's a little bit different, because with Africa, the people attacking them came from the outside. Yeah, they had their conflicts between tribes, but the big threats were from outsiders, people who didn't look like them. In Europe, it was the exact opposite. Yes, every once in a while there was a threat big enough that did come outside of Europe, but that was the exception, not the rule. That the biggest threats were your neighbor. The biggest, most impactful, most immediate dangers were the guy a few miles over. That's the guy you had to be afraid of. That the great rivalries in Europe were Britain and France for a while. 100 years of war, right? And why was that? Well, because they were right next to each other. Then later on, it was France and Germany. And why was that? Well, because they're right next to each other. And then there was, this rivalry of Germany and Russia, and they had a whole back and forth too. Well, why was that? Because they were almost next to each other, and everything in between them were the battlegrounds. That all of the conflicts in Europe were precisely because two groups were right next to each other. That has always been the beginning of conflict in Europe. And whenever it was a conflict with, non-Europeans, right? The Turks, for example. Well, it only became an issue when the Turks were bordering Europe. All of these things are just because someone's next to you. And when you say, you are my enemy because you are close to me, that is the exact opposite of what Africa said. Because Africa said, hey, the people close to me, they're chill, they're cool. But those guys on the outside coming in, those guys are scary. For Europe, it's the exact opposite. The guy 2 towns over is probably the guy that's going to try to kill you. And, over time, thankfully, that circle has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's still like that today. In America, Americans are not really that concerned with those big bads in the world. Oh man, who do we hate now? Oh, maybe Russia and China and North Korea, Iran, right? All those things. No one cares. No one really cares. What they care about, what the average American cares about, is the guy next door who's going to call the cops on you because you forgot to cut your grass. That's what gets the average American pissed off. And so you see, there's this mindset from generations and centuries of just violence and raping and pillaging, right? Viking, because the Vikings were named after the word Viking, which meant in their language to, rape and pillage, right? They go win out Viking. And so all of this constant war and conflict and death and attacking each other and taking from each other, all of that has ruined Europe's faith in humanity. And this is why Europe is the one that generates all of the ideologies. Because they see how broken humanity is. There is there's nothing acceptable about it. So in India, right, we talked about how their faith allowed them to accept the unacceptable. And, that means that nothing ever changed. Not really, not quickly. Because they had such this great and powerful ability to accept what was hard. Europe didn't get that. They got the exact opposite. They are constantly changing over and over and over again because the guy who screwed you is the guy you screw over next generation. Constant war, conflict, revolution. Every time, all the time. And so, when you have kings, well then, screw your kings. We're going to do liberalism. What, you got liberalism? Screw your liberalism. We got socialism. What, you got socialism? Screw your socialism. We got fascism. What, you got fascism? Screw your fascism. We got anarchy. What, you got anarchy? Screw your anarchy. We got Marxism. We got every ideology in the book. Because in Europe, it was constant conflict all the time, every generation. And so, what really boggles my mind is this idea that Europe wouldn't conquer the world. Like, in what universe would a people defined by war and conflict not continue to do war and have conflicts? Like, of course they did. It's like the expression, like iron sharpens iron, so does one friend sharpens another. The only thing is, friend's kind of a loose term in that phrase, yeah. And this is why, even today, constantly, white people, people whose ancestors lived in Europe, even today, they are the ones in constant conflict. Because when a black kid in America does bad at school, gets made fun of, gets left out, he's like, forget school, I'm out of here. When a white kid gets does bad in school, gets left out, and gets made fun of. He says, "Guess I'll kill them all." That white kids are the school shooters. It's not anyone else. It's just white kids. Because our history is raping and pillaging and killing and murdering and slaughtering and enslaving every single person. Not the ones we don't like, everyone. That the word slave comes from Slav, because there was a whole group of people that were like, hey, we're just going to conquer these guys, and then they're going to do our stuff. And that was it. That was all the steps. That Europeans had the worst time from Europeans. And that's something people forget. Is that European countries fought the most wars. And who did they fight? Mostly Europeans. That European countries had the most terrorism. And do you know who were the most common terrorists? Not Muslims. Other Europeans. Take Ireland, for example. There's North Ireland, and then there's Ireland. And in Northern Ireland, they're Protestant, and in the rest of Ireland, they're Catholic. Now, that may seem like not a big difference. I mean, in terms of race, they're exactly the same race. They grew up on the same island. Little itty-bitty island. There's nothing different between them. Besides, a slight variation of denomination. Both still Christian. And you know what that started? Like decades of terrorism, constant terrorism, where people would go to the other side, blow up bridges, blow up stuff. Constantly, all the time. Terrorism. And it wasn't a racial thing. You see, that's the thing. Everyone thinks white people are the most racist. But that's not true. We hate everybody. We hate the people that look like us. There is no group of people that white people won't take out as soon as they become inconvenient. Even if it's your own family. And that's the dark side of individuality. Is when you only care about the individual. There is no community. There's no one to lift you up. And this is why white privilege is so insulting to white people. Because if African Americans were in our position, absolutely they would benefit from being black. If the roles were reversed, absolutely. Because they actually have a race. Black people actually care about other black people. For white people, that's not a thing. When a black person is poor, we have a little commercial that says, "Oh, in the arms of the angels, don't you want to feed this starving African child?" When a white person is poor, we call them trash, garbage. As in, they are worthless. And you see, that's the thing. White people don't care about anybody. To be white is to be alone. To be on your own. And that sounds really hard, and really tough, and really bad. But actually, it's a bit freeing too. Because there's a good side to all this. And the good is that you become your own person. You don't become defined by other people. A lot of the evils in the world have been done because people have been let other people define them. And that's less common with white people. So there's no race war because there's no race. I'm not white. I'm not even European. I don't identify as either of those. I'm American, right? And I know roughly where my ancestors came from. But at the end of the day, I don't have a homeland. There's no place for me to go back to. Not really. I could move anywhere. I could go anywhere and do anything and I'll probably be okay. Because my success is reliant on me. My abilities and what I've developed. And that's the thing. Is that kind of self-reliance, that independence, that individuality is freeing. But just like every other lesson we've talked about, it's a hard lesson to learn. You have to give up a lot to learn that lesson. And this is not like, oh, boo-hoo, white people, like, who cares? It is what it is. And this is the thing. To be an individual is to allow your greatness to come out. And so, yeah, white people have had it hard. So has everyone else in the world. That's not special. The thing is, the gift that comes with the curse with white people is so much more obvious. Because when you're independent and you don't care about what other people think, then you can do some awesome stuff. Some amazing stuff. And that's why America is so great, is because America is the most like that. The most like, I don't care what you say. Because in America, you don't have kings or queens or titles or whatever. No one cares about your PhD in whatever thing. Like, no one cares about what your credentials are or what your title is, what your last name is. In America, no one cares about that because we're at that peak individuality. And so, what's really amazing is every person from around the world can come to America and within a generation realize that gift of individuality. And they don't have to go through the same pain and the same struggle to get to that point. It's the same thing of what we talked about yesterday with African Americans, of how there's this gift of inclusiveness. Well, now there's this gift of individuality. And that's the thing. America gives the world permission to be themselves. And that is something the world really needs. And so, what I want you to understand is that these 4 things There's no best one. There's no most impactful one. There's no greatest one. All four of those things come from all over the world. And when they come together, you get something truly amazing. And that's something to be celebrated. It's truly inspiring when you see someone excel in one of these. And so, every country in the world has had hard times. They've had to go through hardship to learn these lessons. Like iron sharpens iron, right? Grinding, sharpening, it's painful. Europe's no different. And so, be happy that our ancestors or other people all around the world, that they had to endure those hardships so that way you didn't have to as much. Because in the past, there were a lot more wars. Now there's less. There was a lot more poverty. Now there's less. There's a lot more, I don't know, genocides and discriminations on people. And now there's less. Not everything's perfect. We have a long way to go still. But at the same time, it's good that now I have the benefit of growing up with so many people from all over the world. So that way I can learn the lessons of what my ancestors were missing. I can see why my grandfather drank himself to death. It's because he didn't have anyone who had his back. He felt alone and isolated, and he was a genius, and he came up with some awesome stuff. And that wasn't enough, because he had no one to support him. But now I do. And it's thanks to how America brought all of these different values from all over the world to come together. So that way people like me can benefit. So I'm not an individual. I'm not this island alone and no one can ever help me or come to me or do anything. I can still be an individual and build myself up, but I'm not alone. Now there's people who are around, who, yeah, maybe we're not all the way there yet, and maybe they're not nearly as invested as you see in the black community, but it's better. It's more. And that's good. It's a good thing that I didn't have to be as alone. And so, be thankful that your ancestors suffered the way they did, so that way you could have the things that you have now. It wasn't easy on them, and it's not going to be easy on you either. But one day you will be the ancestor that your descendants will be thanking. And that is a beautiful thing, and not something to take lightly. And so, learn these lessons, build upon them, bring them together in your own life, in your own way, Try to make the best of it. Try to be the best you can. Try to be independent so that way you can build something that lasts and is amazing and is inspiring. Try to have a community so that way you're supported and lifted up to do even more. Be logical so that way you can make sense of the world and you can change it in impactful and crucial ways. And have faith so that way when times do get tough, you're resilient enough to get through them. You need all four to be the best that you can be. And so, go ahead, try to learn some of them. I know that everyone's going to have their sticking point. I mean, I have the great benefit of having 3 right from the get-go because of my family. That I have this individuality, I have this great logic, and I have this great faith. The community part needs some work. And that's why I'm so thankful for African Americans in this country, because, oh my goodness, it is just not something I understand. I don't get it. I see it. I'm glad that people have others, but it's a mystery to me. And so one day I hope that I can learn that lesson too, and I can have someone on my side. That would be amazing. But for now, I got my family. And that's really good. And so, see what you already have, what you are blessed with from your ancestors, and see which bits you lack. See what you still have to learn. And understand that it's going to be your arc. That is going to be your page in the story. That it's going to be what you learn and pass on to your kids. So that way they can have it easier than you. So that way they can be greater than you. That's how the world works. That's how we got to the place where we are now. By learning these lessons and building up generation after generation, time after time. And every single time a whole group of people learn a new lesson, there's this acceleration and growth of that society. And so if you want to see the better place, a better world, something amazing, something great, something that lasts, do your part and learn something you don't know. Learn how to do something that you don't know how to do. Learn one of these 4 lessons that you haven't been taught. And grow and improve as an individual, as part of a community, as a logical mind with a faithful soul. Be you, but more than that, be the best you. And hopefully this week got some value for you. That's it for now.